The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Greetings everyone to joining us today. In just a moment, we will get started, but first I want to cover some housekeeping items for today's webinar. Everyone has been muted. If you have questions, please ask it in the question window of GoToWebinar. We will try to get to every question either individually or aloud during the Q&A session at the end. Feel free to ask any questions, and just a reminder that it's not necessary to repeat questions and that we're just working our way down the queue. If we didn't get to your specific question, please reach out to us in the forum at developer.salesforce.com/forum. And one final thing, once the presentation begins, sometimes people do have issues seeing slides advance. If that does happen to you, just make sure to close the webinar and then rejoin, and that usually fixes things. I'd like to introduce to you Salesforce DX, an introduction by Heather Dykstra. Heather is a developer evangelist at Salesforce, has been pivotal in evangelism efforts in Colorado and the United States, and is a member of the Slytherin House, and just recently won a national award because her ability to build awesome stuff. My name is Nisha Bakshi, and I'm on the developer marketing team here at Salesforce. Before I begin, just a quick note that when considering future developments, whether by us or any other solution provider, you should always base your purchasing decisions based on products and features that are already currently available. And a final note, please keep the conversation going on social media. We are on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And remember to use the hashtag SalesforceDevs in your post. We're recording today's session, and we'll share the link with you after the webinar. And with that, we're ready to get started with today's session.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nisha. Well, like Nisha said, my name is Heather Dykstra. I'm a developer evangelist at Salesforce, and today I'm super excited to be presenting the introduction to Salesforce DX. We're going to cover everything from beginning to actually getting hands-on. It's going to be a fast-paced session. Now, if you'd like to follow up with me afterwards, you can via my email, hdykstra@salesforce.com, or on Twitter at @SlytherinChica. So without further ado, let's get into what it means to be in Salesforce DX. What is Salesforce DX? Well, it's actually a lot of things. It's a way that we work together and build together and deliver continuous features, improvements, and whatever else we may be doing in the Salesforce ecosystem. It's amazing because it's got a couple of really neat features. It's really easy to use with our Scratch orgs, which are a new kind of environment that allow you to build from source code directly, and they're able to be quickly created and disposed as you need them. It's also an open platform, which enables you to use third-party tools like Jenkins, Git, Selenium, and your favorite text editors like VS Code. It's also integrated. We've got a consolidated API access through our brand new amazing Salesforce CLI, which will allow you to do everything you need to do on your local computer. And it's collaborative. It's been completely organized around what it means to be in a team and to have code modularization and flexible packaging. So that's what Salesforce DX is. It's a lot of things, but to kind of give you another insight into that, the reason we developed Salesforce DX was to improve our developer experience from beginning to end across all of our lifecycle management. And it all starts in the center of this diagram here at version control, which is our new source of truth. And once you've got this version control source of truth, then you can go through your normal development cycle from plan all the way to release. And while you're going through each of these different steps, Salesforce DX is actually enabling you to be able to be more productive in each of those steps, whether that's through the CLI, or maybe it's through our continuous integration and automation with the DX tooling. We also have this really neat thing, like I mentioned, that's the Scratch orgs. And let's talk a little bit more about what those are, because I know it's a little confusing and you may have never heard of this before. So Scratch orgs are really unique. They're a point-in-time development ecosystem. And it all starts on our production org. So if we're in production, or maybe we're in a developer instance because we're just getting familiar with Salesforce DX, what we're going to do is we're going to enable that org to be a hub org. And that means that we'll have the ability to create Scratch orgs for all of our developers. Now, once it's enabled, then you can create scratch orgs, and you can have many of them here. And each of those scratch orgs can be used for lots of different things. And as you're starting up that new scratch org and you're creating or writing a new feature, you're pushing all of that information into source control with the CLI. And then, because we've got continuous integration and delivery built right in, you can actually have that code be deployed to another scratch org, a sandbox, or maybe even production, depending on how you configure it. It's all in your hands, but scratch orgs are really allowing you to look at a very simple part of your code and do some fast iteration and feature development. This is a great enhancement. Now, not only are scratch orgs super cool in that you can have a lot of them and they're just little small points in time, but you can also define lots of new features about them. For instance, you can tell me what edition you want. Maybe you want a developer edition or an enterprise edition. You can also enable different features. Maybe you're building out a proof of concept and you want to show that you can use communities for something. Well, you can create a scratch org for that. Or you can also enable all sorts of different settings, like I want to make sure that my omnichannel is enabled, or that my cache will clear automatically for me. So it's a really powerful environment. And in order to use this environment and all of Salesforce DX, we actually need a couple of tools. So the first tool that we're going to need is the Salesforce CLI, which allows us to access our hub orgs and create our scratch orgs. And then we can push and pull all of our information into source control and into those orgs. We also have this really neat ability to do some data loading, all powered by JSON. And finally, it's all built on an OCliffe-based plugin framework from Heroku. And what this means is that any average person that wants to go make a new feature for Salesforce CLI can. Now, the second tool that we use for all of this is Visual Studio Code with the Salesforce extensions. And what these extensions do is they allow us to actually have a really powerful integrated developer environment instead of just a text editor. So we'll get code highlighting, a linter, and even have the ability to do testing right in this interface on our local computers. That's a lot of stuff, and I think the best way to show you how to do all of this is to actually just dive into a demo and get hands-on. So let's do that. So the first thing we need, as we mentioned, is that we need the Salesforce CLI. So I've already got it open up here in a tab so that I can show you all how to get this. It's just on our developer portal, and the Salesforce CLI is actually available for any operating system. And then you can go ahead and download it. It's pretty simple. And also on this webpage, we give you a lot of other information about what it is, as well as links to our different setup guides and developer guides so that you are enabled to get hands-on as fast as possible. Now, I've already installed this, so I'm not going to go through the installer, but there is something else we need. We also need Visual Studio Code, because in order to use those amazing extensions that make our developer environment awesome, we have to have the text editor. Now, just like the CLI, Visual Studio Code is available for any operating system. I do want to mention that this isn't the typical Visual Studio that you may have heard of in the past. Visual Studio Code is an open development environment. So that means that it's all free to use, and it's going to be really awesome for you to be able to have all of those extensions that you need to get hands-on with your code. Okay, so I've got Visual Studio, we've got the CLI. Let's go make sure that I've actually downloaded and installed these correctly. I'm actually going to go over here to Visual Studio Code, which I've already opened up for today. And I'm going to open the terminal. Now, I just pressed a hotkey that you may have not seen. So actually, before I do that, let's see a visual overview of how to get to all these places, because I'm going to use some hotkeys today. So the main hotkey that I'm going to use is this one up here to open up our command palette. And we're going to get back to that in a minute, but I'll show you just how cool and powerful it can be. But the main thing that I just did is that I toggled my integrated terminal. And so when you open up this menu on your computer, it's going to tell you which keys you use. I'm currently on a Mac, which is why we have this lovely little command symbol here. So I'm going to click away, and now I'm going to go ahead and make my terminal a little bit bigger, and I want to test and make sure that the CLI was installed properly. So I'm just going to type in SFDX and hit enter. Now, I could have typed this into any command prompt, whether that is here in Visual Studio Code or just a regular terminal on my desktop. But for the sake of ease today, and since we're going to be living in Visual Studio Code for the rest of this presentation, I figured we'd start here. Now, once I ran SFDX, what you can see is that it's actually giving me a whole help menu of different things we can do. For instance, force is the keyword that's going to allow us to access all of our tools for development. And then, of course, our help, which is going to allow us to get help if we need it. Plugins, which will allow us to remove or create new CLI plugins, and that's all that Oak Cliff-based framework there. And then let's just say we needed to update, we could update right here from the command line with that update keyword. So there's a lot going on here, and it's pretty exciting, but we still don't have the extensions installed. So in order to do that, we're going to close this down, and we're going to go over here to this weird little box with a bunch of squares. And that's our extensions icon. So we'll click into that. And if we make this sidebar a little bit bigger, you'll see that there are a lot of different extensions that we can install for a lot of different things. But what I want to do is I want to look for Salesforce. And our second option here is for the Salesforce extension pack. Let's click into that and view more information. So here's the extension pack information. And if I didn't have this installed yet, there would be a nice green button here that we could click to get started. Now, there's a lot of things happening here in the extension pack. We've got a cute little image that's loading there. But something that's really important to know if this is your first time installing it is that you do need the Java 8 Platform Standard Edition Development Kit for everything to work here. I just wanted to highlight that because some people forget that part. So we've got the extension pack, and you might not know exactly what's going on here, and that's what this little extra tab is for. If we look here, we can see that there are a lot of different extensions that we install when we install this pack. We get an extension for Apex, for Aura, and a lot of other things. This is amazing and a great way for us to get started in Salesforce development. So now that we have this extension pack, we're actually ready to go. We can start developing to the Salesforce platform. So we can close that down, and the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to connect up to a dev hub. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just type in SFDX force org list. And this is going to show me all of the different orgs that I've connected to my CLI, because I've already done some of the connecting work ahead of time. And you'll see here that I've got a lot of different orgs, but I have this dev hub that I really want to use today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do another SFDX command to launch that hub. So we'll do force org open, and then we're going to use the -u command, and u is going to let us specify which org we want. And then I'll paste in that name, we'll hit enter, and over here, oh good, it opened in the right Chrome window, we're opening up our dev hub. All right, so this is our dev hub, and it looks just like a regular org because like I said, this can be created with any developer edition or any production org. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to search up and set up for Dev Hub. We'll click in, and we'll see that I've already enabled Dev Hub, but if I had not, I could just simply slide this slider over to enable it. Now, a really important thing here is that once you've enabled Dev Hub, you can't disable it. So be really sure with the org that you're working with that you want this enabled. Especially if you're doing this in production, make sure that you ask all of the people that need to be asked before you do this. Okay, so I've got my dev hub. I'm really excited about it, and I really want to get hands-on with some code. Now, I don't want to just work with any code, though. I want to work with one of our sample apps because I'm helping my team do some edits. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our sample gallery of applications on Trailhead. And what you can see here is on Trailhead, we've got a lot of different sample apps that you as our customers and partners can go get hands-on with today. And I'm going to show you just how to do that with Salesforce DX. So there's a lot of apps here from recipes to e-bikes, but what we're going to work with today is actually this Easy Spaces app, which is an app meant to show you just how cool DX can be. So we're going to click on it and view it in GitHub. And here we are. We can see all of this different code, and this is exactly the file structure that we're looking for when we want to get hands-on with a Salesforce DX project. So what we know is that we can just simply clone this to our local computer and get hands-on. Now, I prepared ahead of time, so I've already got it cloned onto my computer. And what we're going to do is we're going to navigate there now by simply clicking this recent folder that I have here, Easy Spaces LWC. So now I'm somehow in it, but it doesn't look any different. And that's because I can't see my file explorer right now. So if I go up to this left-hand corner, I can click the Explorer, and you can actually see that I have all of those files that I just talked about, but they're here locally. All I had to do was clone it from that Git repo. Okay, I've got all of my code. I have my Dev Hub, and the next thing that's really important is that we need to create a Scratch org so that we can start working with all of this code. So we're going to open up the terminal, and we're going to go ahead and create a new Scratch org. But actually, before we do that, I actually want to look at the README because READMEs can be really helpful in telling us what we want to do next. So I'm going to go ahead and use that command palette that I showed you earlier. And I'm going to just press Command P, and I'm going to search for the README. And you'll see that it's actually searching all of my files for anything with these 3 letters that I just typed. So if I wanted to open up any of these files, I could, but like we said, we really want that README. So let's open that up. And if we scroll up here, there's a lot happening in this README, but if we go down to our installation instructions, we'll know that we've logged into our Dev Hub, we've created our, we've cloned all of the code down, and now we need to create this Scratch org. That's pretty easy, except for that we're using Visual Studio Code with our extensions. So we can do better than using the terminal. We can actually use the command palette to do this for us. So I'm going to press Command-Shift-P to bring up the command palette, and I'm going to look for different Salesforce DX commands. Now you can see that I've recently created a Scratch org, and that's why it's coming up to the top. But if I didn't, and I simply just started searching for Scratch, I have lots of different options that I could select here. Now we do want this first one, so let's go ahead and go into it. Now, the next step is to pick our project scratch.def.json. Now this is that file that I showed you in the slides earlier that tells us which features are enabled or disabled. And I know I just want to use this standard one here, so I'm going to hit enter. And then this is specifically for a webinar today, so I want to change my org alias to be something that I can remember why I created this. So it's Easy Spaces Webinar. Awesome. I've got a great alias here, and this is the alias that I'm going to use for the rest of our time together so that I can always access the right org. I'm going to hit enter, and then the next thing is that we want to know how many days we want this available for. Now this is that easily created and destroyed part. We can set a number of days where this Scratch org will just automatically be destroyed for us. That sets at 7 out of the box, but I can change it from 1 to 30. Now, this is only for today and just for this one feature that we're working on for the webinar. So I'm just going to change it to just 1 day. Because remember, I'm using Git as my source of truth. So I'll hit 1 and hit enter. And now it's going to create our Scratch org for us. So the CLI has popped up telling us it's working on it. And we've used this command here to make sure that we've set this as our default username, we've given it a duration of 1 day, and we've set our alias. We're going to wait just another second here and make sure that it actually creates for us, because until this creates, we can't do anything else. Come on, DX. All right, here we go. So now we can see that we've exited positively with a code 0. And I know it's a little bit confusing, but in Salesforce DX, if you see exit code 0, that's a good thing. We've done the right thing. And you can see that it also successfully created our Scratch org here. And let's say we now want to go ahead and we just want to open up that Scratch org, see what it looks like. Well, we can press Command-Shift-P once more. And this time we can just do SFDX, and I can search for open. And I set this as my default username down here, so I can go ahead and just say open default org. And this will open up my Scratch org back in our browser. So in our Scratch org here, once it loads, we'll see that this looks pretty normal. And if we click over here, I don't see our Easy Spaces app yet. So even though I've configured my Scratch org with our project Scratch definition, it doesn't have any code yet. So our next step is to actually go ahead and push all of our code into our Scratch org. So let's go back to VS Code and do that. So I'm going to do Command-Shift-P, SFDX, and I'm going to say push source to default Scratch org. All right, and again, I just want to highlight here how totally amazing this is. I don't have to remember exactly which things to type. I just let the IDE do it for me. So I'm going to push my source to default scratch org, and this is going to take a little bit. And so while this is working on itself, I want to do one other quick thing and show you something else that's pretty cool about Visual Studio Code with the extensions. If we look over here, we've got a new icon that we didn't see earlier. It's our test icon. And if we click it, we can actually see that we have all these Apex tests here. And once we've pushed this up to our scratch org, we can actually just run our Apex tests right from the CLI. How cool is that? So I know we're still working on pushing our source. So we're going to give it one more second. Come on, I believe in you. We just have to make sure that this actually happens so that we can do our last few steps and show you all the other cool things you can do with the CLI. I don't know why this is taking so long, but that's just how it works sometimes. So let's go ahead, and while this is doing its thing, let's also look at our project scratch def. So I'm going to do that Command P, and I want to look for project scratch def just so that we can see what we configured here. So we can see we've configured our features here for Service Cloud, or Sales Wave, and Service Wave. And we've also made sure that we set our password in our API. That's pretty cool. That's an automatic setting of our password so that we don't have to worry about resetting it later. And it looks like if we go ahead and look back down here, our push has finally completed, and you can see why it took so long. There was a lot of things that we were pushing up to our org. And if we go all the way to the bottom, we're just going to make sure that we see the exit code 0. All right, so we've now exited with code 0. We've pushed everything up, but we have a few more steps to do. We need to make sure we assign our permission sets and load some sample data. So I'm actually going to go to the terminal for this one, and we're going to copy these two commands into the terminal, and these are going to run pretty quickly. So this first one is to make sure that our users can see the easy space objects that we just pushed up. And then we're going to push this next permission set for our space management app, which will be a new app that's going to show up in our app launcher. So we're just pushing these permission sets that we've already defined. It's pretty simple. And then our next thing is that we want to import some data. We've got two different types of data here. Our first one is just plan one, and we're going to quickly import that. You can see it imported a bunch of leads for us. And then we're going to import our second set of data. And we'll wait just another second. Okay, so now we can see that this time we've actually imported a bunch of data that's related to our custom objects that we created when we did our push. Okay, so we've now used the CLI to create a new scratch org. We've sent all of our custom code up to that scratch org. We've seen that we could run tests. We've checked out and sent all of our sample data and made sure that we've assigned our proper permission sets. Let's actually go see what this looks like in our scratch org now. So we'll go back here and let's refresh our page. And if I click on the app launcher, now I can see that I've got my brand new space management app, which is what we just pushed with our permission set and our push of code. And now we can start to see exactly what this amazing app is for. And actually, this is a really cool app because not only is it using Salesforce DX to be pushed up, but we've also got a lot of other features here. For instance, if I click here, when I've launched this little tile here, I actually have launched a flow to get a reservation for somebody who wants a space. So this is all a rental management of space application. So I can say that they want the space for one day. It's for 116 people. And they really want something in San Diego. So I can draft this reservation, and it's going to automatically, via flow, open up here. And that's all because of our Salesforce DX tooling and the fact that we were able to clone this application from the sample gallery. So with that, you've just seen a crazy whirlwind demo of so many things that are possible with Salesforce DX, the Salesforce CLI, and the Salesforce extensions. Now, I didn't cover everything, so if you would like to learn more, I encourage you to make Trailhead your next step. Trailhead is the fun way to learn, and on Trailhead, you can actually find lots of different projects that are going to enable you to get started with Salesforce DX, Visual Studio Code, and so much more. So you can go ahead and follow our bit.ly link there to go ahead and get started. And with that, I would like to say a huge thank you to everyone that has been listening, and I'm going to hand this back to Nisha.
Thanks, Heather. That was some great content. Again, if you have any questions, please post them in the question section of the Q&A go to webinar control panel. Also, just a reminder is that to share feedback with us so that we can make this webinar even better. So please fill out the survey at the end of the webinar. All right, so we have a couple of questions for you, Heather.
Okay.
So, well, the first one was actually just for me and just to share with everybody. Are we going to get a link to the recorded video of the session? The question is, the answer is yes, you will. Also, we have a YouTube channel, and that's youtube.com/developerforce, I believe. I put it in the chat window. So if you just take a look at that, you'll also be able to see other video and webinar content, including this one as well. Okay, the next question, Heather, is it possible to add an official service pack to a Scratch org, for example, financial services cloud packages?
So I'm actually not sure here because I haven't used a service pack in a Scratch org yet. So I'm going to have to do some research on that and get back to everyone, maybe in a comment on the YouTube video. Yeah.
Comment on YouTube or even on Twitter. What we can do is...
Or on the developer forum.
Yeah, let's do developer forum. I think that's a great place. Okay, another question. I'm currently using the Force.com IDE. Why should I use Salesforce DX?
Yeah, that's an important question. So as of right now, the Force.com IDE is in maintenance only state, which means that we're not actually pushing any updates for it. And the only updates that you will ever see are going to be critical security issues. Also, we really want you to know that on October 12th of this year, 2019, we're not going to provide support for the Force.com IDE at all. So it's really important that you actually move to Salesforce DX.
Great, thanks for that. I have an idea for a plugin that I'd like to add to my CLI. How can I do that?
Oh, that's great. So you can actually do that really easily by going ahead and checking out the developer.salesforce.com documentation on Salesforce DX CLI plugins. There's a lovely guide there that walks you through step-by-step how to get started.
Sweet. And you talked a lot today about other features of Salesforce DX, but are there things that you didn't have the chance to cover because of limited time?
Oh man, yeah, there's so much more that Salesforce DX can empower you to do. I think my two favorite things that I didn't get to show today are packaging and the Apex Replay Debugger. I'm really hopeful we'll get to cover those in a webinar soon.
Great. And hopefully, Heather, you and I can work together to have that webinar.
Yeah.
Okay, so another question about cost. Are these tools free or is there a cost associated?
All of the tools that I showed today are free. That's why we showed you how to get to each of those URLs. They're all completely free for you to download.
Great. And can I use other IDEs like IntelliJ?
So Salesforce DX support can be implemented by third parties, but Salesforce itself is focused on Visual Studio Code. So we're only going to be making extensions for Visual Studio Code. However, if you do have a favorite IDE like IntelliJ, you can go ahead and check with the software provider to see if they have planned for Salesforce DX support.
Great. And is Salesforce DX supported in a Windows environment?
Yes. All of Salesforce DX, from the CLI to the Visual Studio Code extension packs, all of that is available in Mac, Windows, or even on Linux.
Can you also share the web address to download SFDX again?
Yeah. Do you want me to just share my screen?
Yeah, if you could share your screen, do we have like a short code or a bit.ly? That would be...
I don't have a bit.ly. I just It's just developer.salesforce.com/tools/sfdxcli.
Okay, yeah, that seems simple enough. And I think that's all the time we actually have for questions. If you have additional questions, please make sure to ask it in our developer forum. And thank you so much to everybody joining us today, and Heather, for that amazing content.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.